This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
This industry has taken a lot from me, personally, from friends to relationships to everything, it's one of those industries that takes so much from you and gives you back just a little, just enough to keep you in love, It's really, I don't know, it's hard to describe.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. It's not fair to judge Middle Eastern cuisine as one, but the flavours, techniques and combinations from the region are truly spectacular. In Australia, we are blessed with strong ties to many countries in the region, as waves of migration have brought new Australians to our shores, and with them, the generations of culinary understanding too. That influence is now bearing the most incredible fruit in the restaurant landscape. Paul Farag is the executive chef of Aalia and Nour in Sydney. Paul, how are you going?
Hi, Anthony. Pretty good. Yourself?
Good. It's good to have you on the show. You're pretty busy at the moment trying to open a new restaurant in Aalia. What's it feel like at the moment trying to get the wheels in motion?
I kind of describe it as being out in the ocean and treading water and, trying to concentrate on your breathing and just making sure that it all works out. Yeah, it's hard at the moment, as I'm pretty sure you've heard. Most restaurants currently are going through a bit of a shortage. We've just come out of a 4-month lockdown, and people are just gagging to get out and eat and drink and be merry. And it's sort of we're sort of coming at full capacity without much support from, our teams, but we're trying our best at the moment.
You just mentioned that you've come out of the lockdown and Nour is open. What's the energy been like and the response from consumers since reopening that restaurant?
It's been great, to be honest with you. I think our first day reopening was 120 packs, which is pretty much capacity. And it was good. It was a bit rough, opening up with a relatively new team. We spent, weeks. I think it was 1 week actually, just concentrating on the menu whilst doing the providore thing that we kicked off halfway through lockdown. It was tough, to say the least. It was a long, high hour week. I haven't done hours like that in a long time. But it was good. It was the reception was really good. People were really happy, and it was good to have a dining room of that size back in full swing.
Nour has had some pretty incredible chefs over its time, and now you're at the helm, and you're also behind Aalia, the new one. Tell us about your approach to Middle Eastern cuisine.
So essentially, it started out as I've never cooked Middle Eastern food myself, besides, maybe staff meal or things like that. And the opportunity, Ibby and George contacted me with the proposition just over a year ago now, a year and a bit ago. And, my background is Egyptian, Egyptian Australian. And I sort of thought, I've never done it. I never wanted to be, typecast, you could call it, as a Middle Eastern boy cooking Middle Eastern foods. I went into French and all the classical stuff. And, I saw it as a good opportunity. And there's a few people around Australia that are really pioneering the push for Middle Eastern food. And I just thought, you know what, let's give it a shot. And since then, it's been a bit of a dive, like a crash course, I guess you can call it. Like, because I know the flavors, I know, I guess, what you remember as a child, what certain things went with what, like the flavor pairings and marriages. But I think when I started into it, I was kind of really excited, and I just dove head in first. And I didn't want to do stereotypical food. I think from my previous experiences, the last, say, 5 or 6 years of my life or my career haven't been very stereotypical. So when I came on to Nour, I said, let's change it up a little bit. I just didn't want Middle Eastern food to be, that typecast. So my approach to it, I guess, to go around to it is, I don't know, I like the flavors, but I want it presented in a different way. And just sort of like ingredients that aren't sort of known to be Middle Eastern. So that's sort of my little shtick, I guess you could say.
You mentioned your Egyptian heritage and growing up in Australia. Take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
Okay, well, any sort of, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern family, food is a strong part of, your upbringing. So, like, my parents migrated here, I think, in the early 80s. They migrated here with my brother. I think he was still a young child. And, they were both teachers, came here to Australia, better life and whatnot. And they sort of brought back, certain dishes that, they grew up with and loved. My old man was probably the better cook out of the two of them. My mother's probably not going to be happy if she ever does listen to this, which I doubt. He was always the guy that would, he would make dinner probably, 5 nights out of the week. And he was always like the one that would, make the weirder things, I guess. Things that, like I saw this the other week where Stan Bully had created a dish. Ibs had created this dish, and I was like, wow, that looks very similar to something my old man did. And it was like a fava bean sort of terrine. And I was like, oh, wow, it's like this. And he's like, yeah, it's very similar. Obviously, cultures were blended. When you think about back in history, everyone sort of invaded everyone else, and cultures then took on other cultures or food styles. So, yeah, food was just, a lot of strong flavors, a lot of, I guess you could say, a lot of dipping, a lot of sharing. There was never it was weird going over to like your mate's parents, like your mate's house, and they had dinner and it'd be like, meat and 3 veg, for example. That was not really a thing that I'd ever seen before. And I was like, it was kind of cool, don't get me wrong. As a young kid, you're like, oh, wow, I don't eat nothing like this. Where's the bread? Like there's always bread and rice at every meal in a Middle Eastern household. You can't get around that. So, yeah, you end up becoming a very fat kid, I think, in most of those sort of cultures, because you're not allowed to leave the table until you're completely full.
When did you realize that you wanted to start a career as a chef?
I guess so. I left school early. I dropped out in year 10 and decided I wanted to, I wanted to get into cooking. I just wasn't sure. I didn't really know enough about the food scene. What I was I liked the fact that it was, I guess you can call it back then, like the underbelly of it was just went against every grain of society. You went to work when everyone else was off. And the fact that, it was kind of like rebellious in a sense. And to a young, teenager kid, that was, very attractive. I guess I think it was, this is where my memory is a bit rough, but I guess in my early sort of high school days, I picked up a pot wash gig at the local Thai joint. And, I loved every second of it, like elbows deep in this deep sink, scrubbing out pans and helping the chef, create chop up things throughout the prep time. And it was like really fun. And at the end of the night, he would cook up a meal and then, sneak me, give me a beer and stuff. And that was amazing, as a young kid. Not that I encourage underage drinking, but, just retelling it how it is. So from there, I guess I loved it. I found an interest into it. And then I think I picked up another job working at a coffee shop. And then the chef walked out one day and then I put my hand up to jump in. And I won't actually name the cafe because it wasn't very good food. It was all there was no stovetop. It was a conveyor belt, pizza oven and a microwave. And you would just basically, cook eggs in a microwave, things like that. Not the glamorous side of the world, but hey, it was an eye opener. I guess then it got time to drop out of school, and I was, unsure of how to go about an apprenticeship, and I don't know, just really naive about the whole process. And I dropped out. My brother at the time, and just sort of helping him out at the workshop, doing things. He had a customer that had a restaurant in Randwick. And so I basically said, yeah, no worries, I'll start working with you. And funnily enough, come full circle years later, I live right around the corner from that restaurant, which is no longer a restaurant. It's actually a supermarket. But it's funny, it's just funny how you sort of remember these little things and where life takes you, I guess. But yeah.
For some of your apprenticeship, you worked with Michael Moore at the Summit restaurant. Do you have any stories of that time?
I saw Michael not long ago, so I don't know how much I could say. No, that was probably my real forte, my real foray into the cooking world, I'd say. At the time, I was pretty blessed to go to TAFE, and I had a really close teacher who I still speak to this day. And he sort of guided me and told me, hey, you're 17 years old, you think you're king shit or whatever, you think you're running the show. And I did, there was girls, I had a girlfriend. I thought I was king of the world, And he told me, he goes, mate, there's a whole world of cooking out there. And he showed me food from around the world and all these other restaurants. I think he was the person that showed me the French Laundry cookbook. And it sort of changed my view. And so I thought, I should probably get out of this. I'm a bit too comfortable and go into something a bit harder. So I think there was a job going at the Summit back then. It was called, and now it's called the O-Bar, but same sort of, same space, the revolving restaurant in Australia Square. And, basically he, got a job as an apprentice chef, jumped onto larder. Back then, you'd have 4 people on larder. And to me, that was it was actually a pretty cool learning experiences. I laugh about it now with some of my guys in the kitchen, learning how to make chlorophyll paint and painting martini glasses. Just little things like that, I remember, I think pastry was opposite larder, and they used to make this puff pastry twirl around a cream horn mold. So it was a little spiral, and they'd hang that off the martini glass, and all of these little, I guess you call them naff now if you saw them, but they were kind of cool to a young, teenager. And it was a wild kitchen. I got to experience many firsts in that kitchen, I guess you could say. I'm not sure how much I can say on this podcast. But yeah, it was good fun. And I got to meet some really good people. Andy Bowdy was the pastry chef at the time, who we ended up living together through that relationship whilst working there. So it was just it was a big cover restaurant. You do 300 covers, and it was, big team. It was good, big days, stuff like that. But it was still, it was part of my sort of growing up, I guess you could say. And now I think I did a couple of years there and decided to move on. Where did I? Yeah, I went for a job at Balzac with Kempy, and at the time, I think his head chef said they weren't looking for anyone. This is back when you had to fight to get into a kitchen, where now it's the complete opposite. They're begging you to come into their kitchen.
Were there any lessons or advice that you took from your time with Michael Moore?
Yeah, I'd say it was good to learn how a big brigade works like that. And it's back when a time where, you had big brigades and there was a sense of discipline, chain of command. There was like a chef de partie would run larder, for example, and then he would have a commie and then an apprentice, things like that. There was a bit more of a structure to how the kitchen would run. And you don't really see that in Australian kitchens. I think that's because of, labour shortage and costs as well.
You've worked with some pretty incredible chefs, Colin Fasnage, Brent Savage, Josh Nyland. What's been the real key moments that have taken you on the path that you're on as a chef?
I guess the Four in Hand is the one I fell in love with, I guess. I always loved that pub, and I loved what it meant to me in my life. I left the Summit to work with Fass, and it was through Warren Turnbull that actually put me onto Fass, and that's how I got the job. I went in for a trial one Thursday morning, and then we sat down in the pub, and he's like, okay, cool. So when do you want to start? I was like, next week will be good. And he's like, no, it's all right. Just start tonight. Little did I know that he had no one on the garnish section that night. So it was me. Didn't really know the menu. I just done a trial, you don't really know what the hell's going on. And and that was trial by fire, I guess. And and then I got to witness some of Colin's best moments, as I like to call them. And I still have a relationship with Colin still to this day. I worked for Colin for, I think, a couple of years back then. And then he was a very pivotal, like almost a mentor, I'd say, in my career, and still someone that I can call up and ask for advice,
What was it about with your time there at Four in Hand that was so important to the building blocks of your career?
It was like a pirate ship, to be honest with you. That's probably why I fell in love with it. I think many of us still call it the old pirate ship. It was just a group of, men and women that just got it done, just kept pushing on to try and do whatever we could. It was a bit like Fawlty Towers in that first original incarnation of the venue. It was like a disjointed, multi-leveled two-core room. Like, it was just a bit all over the shop of how it was put together, but it worked and it was great. And it was just, we were doing something that was, I guess, very unique to the Sydney dining scene at the time. And to young chefs, we were breaking down whole pigs, just utilizing, that whole nose to tail philosophy. I guess that's where my love of butchery first started. Just breaking down animals it's just very therapeutic to me. It might sound like I'm a serial killer or something like that, but you might get into a different genre on the podcast, Huck. But basically it really, I found something, therapeutic about it. I loved trying to utilize as much as we could. We were very clever with how, food costs run and how, to make the business money, you'd get this amazing Blackmore corned beef, cut out a perfect square out of it for a dish for the restaurant. But then there was trim that would used into all of these things that up until that time I hadn't really seen. It was just a clever kitchen, the way we utilized, every bit of trim, I guess you could call it. The corned beef would go from like basically you cut a square out of the corned beef, this Wagyu corned beef from David Blackmore, and then all that trim will then get used in the pub menu for a pot of pho. Like the utilization of every cut was something that I hadn't seen, and a lot of restaurants don't do, I guess. And I guess Fass was very good at that and taught me that.
How different was it moving to a kitchen like Monopole compared to your time at Four in Hand?
It took a bit of adjustment. So I guess I worked at Bentley first. So I came on board to Bentley and did, a trial and decided it wasn't maybe for me. But Brent, being a very clever chef and chef owner, sort of kept me, close to his reach and kept me in the family, I guess. And so I ended up doing casual work for Brent for about 9 months at Bentley. So yeah, it was good. Don't get me wrong. It was an eye-opener. I'd never done that style of food before. And I really got into, using the textura products and all these hydrochlorides that help you cook in a certain way and can create certain dishes and presentation. So that's something I'd never done before, really. And it was really good to learn and be a part of that family, and I still speak to a lot of those boys, and it's we've all sort of spread out. A lot of us have gone on and done their own things, but I think it was Brent's an integral part of the Sydney dining scene. I guess you can't deny that. He's brought up a lot of younger fellas, younger chefs, and taught them a lot of things that you see now in other restaurants. But yeah, then going on to Monopole was probably the smallest kitchen I've ever worked in. It was a 60-seat restaurant with a kitchen, that's, 5 meters wide, I guess 1 meter width, small, like a cool room that I've never seen before. Like I've seen, home fridges a bit bigger than that. But we made it work, and we could do, 2 sittings of 60 covers or something. It was like, I think Valentine's Day there, I remember we're doing 120 covers, and that's a lot for a tiny little kitchen with, 4 or 5 guys in a line, busting it out. And it was good. It was good working with the charcoal, and that's where I sort of got into the charcuterie world, I guess. I really developed a passion for charcuterie. Like, I think the way I describe it is like, whenever I take on a new role, I sort of dive in head first, and then I go down such a deep rabbit hole that it's like it's sometimes detrimental to my own mental sanity. I don't sleep very well, and I start thinking about weird things, and I come into work and I'm like, hey, we're going to do this. And they look at me like, what's wrong with you? You obviously haven't slept, or you polished off a bottle of red last night or something like that. And I think I did that. I bought every charcuterie book I could think of, and just like researched and basically asked the question, why do you not see this? Why do you not see that? And then, we were doing goose hams, duck hams, you name it. I remember doing Wagyu short rib, like boneless short rib, chuck tail flap, all the weird cuts, or the smaller percentage cuts, that lesser known cuts, I guess you could call, into charcuterie. And then I realized why you don't do that, because Brent would then sit down with me and say, hey, we need to reel it in on the food cost this week, because you'd lose, say, 50% of the weight after trimming, curing, drying. That $70 a kilo short rib has now become $150 a kilo. And, you're slicing it and selling it for $18. You're not really making any money. You're probably losing money. So all of those things were a good learning curve, but it opened up my eyes to the possibilities of working with certain products and what you could do with those certain products. But yeah, like, I still love charcuterie to this day. Whether or not I have the time and the space to do it is definitely another thing. But what we did out of that tiny little kitchen with charcuterie especially, inoculating molds. I think I experimented once with koji, trying to inoculate some koji into the mold. wasn't very good, and I sort of left it at that. But, you know, like just trying to, you know, produce charcuterie for a restaurant, like doing it for yourself and you know, spending the time and making it right is easy enough. But having a constant foresight and like forecasting, I'm going to need, you know, 6 brazolas each day on Friday and Saturday night. You know, it's going to take me 6 to 12 weeks to produce that. Okay, I need a forecast. You know, things like that was it got me into I guess it led me into my following role when I was talking about, you know, like seeing into the future in production of something, you know.
Well, that future role was with Josh Nyland at the fish butchery, which really opened up so many people's eyes about nose to tail or nose to scale, if you like. Tell us about the fish butchery and what sort of influence it had on your career.
I guess, you know, that business model has changed the way almost every chef in the world works. It definitely changed the way I work. It changed the way we all think. I remember meeting up with Josh in the site when it was still the hairdresser's joint, and the dry store that is, as it's known now, was like a mural of like just different colors and paints and things like that. I remember going in there and him walking me through and telling me, this is where I want the cook area. This is where it's going to be marble topped. And I remember thinking, you know, okay, I don't really see it. I didn't really understand it. And I think we had another chat. And I think how he sold me on the concept was, he said to me, I know that you've done whole pigs, you know, you've done charcuterie with Monopole. He's like, whatever you can do to a pig, I reckon you could do to a fish. And me being a little bit stubborn or egotistical, whatever you want to call it, I said, yeah, you know what, challenge accepted. And I saw it as a opportunity to, you know, see what I could do and push my boundaries. And that's what, like, I guess the role was sold to me as, like, you know, running a shop that could bend everyone's mind with what we could do. And yeah, I guess we achieved that.
Is there a moment or a process that really changed your mind and turned the page for you in regards to fish butchery?
Listen, I believed in the product very early on. You know, like just talking to Josh and that whole spiel and everything like that got me on board. And I took that and ran with it pretty much on my own. Like I said to you, like I sit at home and I'll run with an idea till I exhaust the hell out of it. Now, when we first opened that shop, we had no idea what we were doing, to be honest with you. It was pretty much 4 of us, you know, not really understanding how a retail shop works. We had front of house people. We just didn't know. You know, we were all chefs. We were used to restaurants, you know, front of house teams and whatever. And after a while, we slowly figured out that, you know, it didn't work, I guess. So we had to just change up the model and go, okay, get rid of these front of house people, because what are they there for? They don't really know the product as well as the person they were speaking to. And then it became like a couple of us you'd come in, you'd speak to sort of the guys running the show or the shop, and they would know about the product. They could guide you through your, you know, hey, I want to cook this. I want to have this dinner party. And, you know, everyone's used to eating snapper, flathead, the same sort of 3 fish that everyone eats. And we were like, hey, hold on, there's Alfonsino. We've dry aged it. We've done this. Or, you know, like it became that, that was probably the most fun of like saying, hey, I've just done some weird things to this fish. Come and have a look at this, you know, like here, this will really wow your dinner guests, you know? Yeah.
Given your inclination to really dive head first into projects and explore them in such detail, tell us about Aalia and the deep dive that you've done to explore what you'll be doing there.
So the idea for Aalia, within, I think, 3 months of me working with the fellas at Nour, the site had been taken on by the guys and they were like, hey, we want to do something here. And it went down this road of, you know, kind of like a Middle Eastern seafood restaurant. And, not really something that, again, connotations of Middle Eastern food is not really seafood, but, that whole region is surrounded by coastal waters. And so that was the first idea. And I was like, I don't want it to be a seafood restaurant because you sort of limit your clientele. Not everyone eats seafood. And Middle Eastern food has a strong vegetarian following. Like a lot of our dishes are vegetarian or can be vegetarian/vegan. So I didn't want to like sort of pigeon myself into like that sort of style. And, that's Josh's thing and he's very good at it. And I didn't want to sort of follow suit, if that made sense. Going back to how I am, I like to sort of go against the grain. And I said, okay, let's have, a decent seafood offering. And then it slowly turned into me like digging deep. And there was a very early morning / night that I thought about, I went into like just the research of, cookbooks and oldest cookbooks in the world, whatnot. And I found these two cookbooks, right? That's believed, one of them is believed to be the oldest cookbook in the world. All right. Or the first ever cookbook ever made. And it is from the 10th century, I believe. I'm just looking at it. Yeah, it's the 10th century, right? And it's what the region you'd call Iraq now. And it was something that I found online. I ordered it, paid through the nose for it and got it. And that sort of started this thing. And then I found a 13th century Egyptian cookbook, found like an Ottoman Empire cookbook. And so have gone down this road of this region and its cooking, right? And these books aren't necessarily cookbooks as you would see today in this day and age. They're more of like a way of life. So how to clean yourself, how to, make sure that your digestion is aided, how to look after yourself, like with hydration, like making soaps out of byproducts, just a complete way of life book. That whole sustainability conversation, I guess, that is proper sustainable, like this is the real stuff. And it's all, centuries ago. And we sort of distance ourselves so much from that. So I've used that and I've looked into ingredients and cooking techniques from these books and have decided that that's what I want to do with Aalia. I want it to be kind of like we've written a blurb, so I won't ruin it too much, but it's basically someone else has written the blurb and I've just okayed it. Basically, it's going to be like pretty much that whole region of the Middle East and how nomadic these people are and wherever that sort of Arab culture has traveled and using that food style. Like, so you're talking the whole North and the Horn of Africa, going into that Middle Eastern region, up around the Mediterranean. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't want it to be, I don't want ingredients that everyone sort of associates with the Middle East. But then again, it's a fine balance, I feel, of trying to create something that is not too obscure that everyone freaks out, but the wording and the dishes that are on the menu that I've written so far are a little bit out there. So even speaking to someone like Ibi, who's, was 18 years old when he first migrated to Australia, he looks at me and goes, "Where the hell did you come up with this?" And he's just like, "What are you saying? Are you even speaking Arabic?" And things like that. That's the path I'm going down now. I'm just I really want to be, showcasing what the Middle Eastern cuisine can be, And I think Dan Hong said this years ago, talking about how, everyone assumes like dumplings should be like really cheap, They just have this connotation, dumplings, whatever, $2, where, Mr. Wong's does, they're quite expensive dumplings, but there's a lot of love and labor and effort put into them. So I think it's the same thing with Middle Eastern food, You can happily go down to your local kebab shop, get a snack pack for something for $15 or something like that. And it's delicious, sure, whatever. But we're not trying to do that. We're trying to trying to break people's perception. You know, like certain ingredients like tamarind is common in the Middle East where everyone thinks it's a Thai cuisine ingredient, you know, like taro, again, Asian influences, but it's actually North Africa. So all of these things that I'm trying to, you know, just change it a little bit.
COVID has been a bit of a challenge and delayed the project a little bit, but you're not too far away from opening the doors. What are you most looking forward to as you step into the role and Aalia takes full flight?
So for me, I'd like to get into I've designed this kitchen from ground up. I've been a part of the build process from the get-go. It'll be good to get into it and see how it works and show people what we've been working on so hard lately. You know, like this is a project that I think February I had my QCC order already put in. The menu had pretty much been written by, I'd say, June. It's changed a little bit since then, and it will probably change again when we do reopen. But it's been a year of doing this whilst running an extremely busy restaurant, Nour, you know, and dealing with the normal issues that you face day to day in the restaurant game.
You're renowned for really throwing yourself into the role that you take on. What is it that you love about what you do?
Oh, that's a loaded question, that one. I tell you, I'd be lying to you if I said to you that every day was happiness. You know, this industry is an industry that has taken a lot from me personally and my life. But it's not, I don't know, it's a love-hate relationship to describe it. You know, when I left Monopole, I had decided I didn't want to cook anymore. You know, I was just, I decided I wanted to take a break. I wasn't ready to keep going. You know, I'd had offers to go be the head chef of so-and-so, and I just sort of kept denying them. I just didn't want to do it. So I thought, the fish world would be great. So jumped into the fish world, and it was great, you know, but certain things, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same sort of, I guess, satisfaction or gratification that you get from, I guess, serving people, like actually them eating your food. You know, like I still have a very good following, I guess, of locals in the Paddington Woollahra area, you know, and a lot of them have followed me over to Nour. And it was great having this relationship of like explaining to them, hey guys, you should do this tonight, you know, cook this like this. And it was fun. Even the master classes that we used to do, Josh and I, you know, they were probably the things that I enjoyed the most. And I know that makes me sound like an egomaniac, but you know, you sort of crave that. Every chef does crave that. They want to feel like what they're doing is, I guess, you know, you're not just deep frying a schnitzel and putting chips on a plate and sending it. You know, you're doing something for the greater good in a way, you know? And if you don't feel that, then that's why chefs sometimes, you know, they leave the industry or they go do something else, you know? And like I was saying before, like this industry has taken a lot from me, you know, like personally, like from friends to relationships to everything, you know, like it's one of those industries that takes so much from you and gives you back just a little, just enough to keep you in love, you know? It's really, I don't know. It's hard to describe. There's days you wake up and you're like, oh, why do I do this? Why do I do this? And then there's days where you go into work with such energy, such happiness. And I think, you know, that's the hardest part, is trying to find the balance in between those two and making it work.
Well, Paul, I think you've been incredible in making that work, and we're very much looking forward to seeing what you present at Aalia with this deep dive that you've done in the Middle East. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks very much, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.